when I try to talk to them about, the saints and our patristic theology that like spanned across, a couple thousand years at this point, starting with the apostles and then us having apostolic succession, they kind of just like blow it off as like, okay, yeah, whatever, cool, that's like your groove, and then we're on our own thing. Like, but my thing is that do they not see their reformers like Calvin and Luther as like their version of the early church fathers, or am I like missing something? Because a lot of what they do just seems like hypocritical deflection, if that makes sense, like at the way they respond to orthodoxy.
I mean, I think you can make an analogy to the way that they see the reformers, I mean, to the fathers, but I mean, they're going to all, class them all as just fallible men and kind of put them on a scale of maybe, Augustine's better than Jerome and, Calvin is better than Augustine. So it's just going to be a scale of gradation, but I guess you're trying to say that like, their ecclesiology is incoherent, is the point you're trying to make, right?
It's incoherent ecclesiology, but it's like it's almost like they want to make this very generalized kind of parallel between like, okay, well, you guys have the ancient church fathers, which offered a little bit, but
yeah.
Our guys are a little bit better because
right.
They quote unquote fleshed out Christianity on a larger scale,
right?
But it's like, for me, but like, I guess my thing is like, do they not see like the hypocrisy? Because a lot of our theology, like we do, for example, we do the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. It's like, I've been studying John Calvin for a couple weeks now, my one course, and it's like he shifted the entire theological landscape of the city of Geneva to the point where he had full right to execute people, and he did on multiple occasions. So so like, why? How are they just like? I guess my question is, are they just like ignoring themselves when they say, oh well, you guys listen to fallible men about your theology, but at the same time we have entire denominations formed from men that came in the like post schism and did the same exact thing. Like, you see what I'm saying? If that makes sense, I don't know.
Yeah, I just think that there's an inability to see what's hidden in plain sight, what's staring them right in their face, and there's all these coping mechanisms that go into effect when you start explaining these things, and they're just they're going to default to just thinking like it's as if there was not a body of doctrines that is the deposit of faith. They think of it like we're all sort of in the process of mining the scriptures and coming up with the best theology, and we're all sort of in the same boat, approximating it. And some people like Athanasius might have gotten 3 rings out from the center target. Augustine got 2 rings out. Calvin's 1 ring out, right? So it's all just sort of on a scale of, and nobody's really getting it right totally. But the problem with this is that the New Testament describes the deposit of faith as a complete body of doctrines handed down. Now, if that's the case, then it can't be the case that the fundamental linchpin of the gospel, justification by faith alone, is missing for 1,500 years. And if you read Alistair McGrath's book, Justitia Dei, the famous Protestant scholar, his whole book is dedicated to demonstrating that nobody taught Luther's conception of justification by faith alone in the first 1,500 years. And by extension,
except
obviously,
for him, yeah.
By extension, obviously not Calvin's doctrine either, because they do have significant points of disagreement. For example, Luther believed and thought that his conception of baptismal regeneration was compatible with justification by faith alone, as did Augustine think that his version of the doctrine of grace was compatible with regeneration by baptism, water baptism. Obviously, Augustine didn't teach justification by faith alone, but this is partly why you see people like Anthony Rogers or James White or Gavin Ortlund or all these people. They then try when they're faced with this challenge to do the quote mine exercise. Let me go find phrases that kind of sound like the Reformation doctrine, and I'm going to interpret those through eisegesis to mean sola fide. And if you watch Perry Robinson's 5-hour deconstruction of Anthony Rogers' arguments, I mean, you can just see how pitiful this is. And every one of them does the exact same exercise. I did the exact same thing too, because what they're going to do is go to books like I have over there on my shelf, William Webster's 3 volumes and then 2 other volumes of quote mines. And William Webster is a famous Calvinist who basically just did a gigantic 3-volume quote mine series. And so it doesn't.
He wrote one of my textbooks, I think.
Yeah, and then you've got before him, there were Anglicans who did quote mines exactly the same. So the point is that just like Roman Catholics trying to prove the papacy, it's not, they don't even care about the context of the quotes. It's just, let me find some things that kind of sound like Vatican I, and then I'm going to paste it as, tell the story. Oh, see, it's Vatican I. Because the Pope is the first in the councils. It says the Rome is the rock, right? So therefore Vatican I. And this is just all non sequiturs, right? So just because, for example, you have phrases like "we're saved by grace," we're saved, we're justified by faith in the Church Fathers. That isn't the equivalent of what Luther meant by those things. And so it's all just equivocation. It's all word concept fallacy mistakes, and that's why I think the easiest route is to, point out to these people that, look, if you think the gospel is justification by faith alone, and you admit that none of these people really had a clear doctrine of justification by faith alone, really the crux of this argument is that the church didn't really have the doctrine of justification by faith alone, which you defined as the linchpin of the gospel for the first 1,500 years. It's just ludicrous.
Yeah, and that was the other thing I was going to say. It's like, now, listen, I take things pretty simply because I'm an idiot, but it's like, on one hand, I see they, really try to hardline theology and, draw lines in the sand concerning what's said in the gospel, especially when you're talking about, okay, justification by faith alone, and then even to the point of removing verses out of the book of James, for example. I mean, you know that. It's like, but on the other hand, I'm sitting in college and, I have these professors that want me and my classmates who are stupid undergrads who have no clerical authority, along with these, okay, yeah, sure, whatever, master's or doctorate degree in theology, which doesn't mean jack to me for all intents and purposes, doing exegetical work. And I'm like, okay, but why are we dedicating ourselves to that process if we already had hundreds of years of church fathers that already did the heavy lifting?
Well, and it's even worse than that, because in the Protestant system, due to their faulty ecclesiology, every generation has to reinvent the wheel. You can't trust that your pastor got it right. You can't trust that your denomination got it right. Everybody has to reinvent the wheel every generation. It's just ridiculous. I mean, Jesus said he would send the Holy Spirit to guide the church. And that's why they say, since they're not part of the church, oh, well, that's a promise to the invisible elect. But none of that really does anybody any good, because every generation is going to have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, when you get into the nitty gritty of the differences in the theology between, say, the East and the West, I mean, just because you were born into a Lutheran church or an Anglican church, and it's even if it's conservative, I mean, if you have the Protestant assumption that all synods, all men, they're all fallible, liable to error, and as the Westminster Confession says, often do err, then everybody's in the same boat of reinventing the wheel in every generation. And just how unworkable and impractical is this?
I mean, so, and that's so it's just it almost reminds me of this kind of theological equivalency to subjective more. It's like subjective theology, across generations, I guess is what you're saying. And I see that.
Well, that's why the Protestant position is based in Enlightenment individualism, and then it's no accident that you get out of that atomistic individual mindset constant division, constant schism. Now, yes, every church is liable to a schism because of free will, but when the governing principle, the operating principle of this system is the right of private interpretation, nobody can tell me my interpretation is wrong. There's no authority higher than me and my reading of the Bible. That's what we call normative authority, right? So Jesus apparently didn't see fit to give his church any normative authority to bind anybody to any interpretations, even though clearly in the 7 ecumenical councils, the church in the first 1,000 years is operating as if they had normative authority and the ability to excommunicate people. What is today's service? The service of today is, unless you were in a church connected to a monastery or a bishop, you probably didn't hear the anathema service, but today's service proves that the Orthodox Church is the only church out there still in continuity with the first 1,000 years of Christianity, because the 7th Council created a specific service that's a liturgical celebration that goes along with the 7th Ecumenical Council confirming icons, the Sunday of Orthodoxy. The Sunday of Orthodoxy has anathema service, right? You sing, there's the recitation of rejection of the various heretics. And in that service, we have the affirmation of the doctrine that the church has normative authority and the right to excommunicate people. Okay, there's hardly any Protestant churches on the face of the earth that still do excommunications. Maybe some Calvinists, and maybe some like Reformed Anglicans or strict Anglicans, maybe some Lutherans somewhere. I don't know, but very, very minuscule. So how is Protestantism the true church when it's lost something so fundamental as the notion of an authoritative body that can excommunicate people?
Right. And I guess my thing is, like, even if there were Protestant denominations that still carried out excommunications, it really wouldn't matter because they could just pick up and make another denomination.
Yeah, just go do your own thing.
Right? Anyway.
Yeah, just go start another one in the strip mall next door. So, yeah.
Yeah, like it's like negligible to even excommunicate somebody because they're all buddy afterwards. Like that's another big problem I have. It's like there's no like continuity or unification amongst these Protestant denominations except for a rejection of the Catholic Church. That's all it seems to be as far as.
Well, that's how they started, right? Was a negative position, right? We're not Rome. And so then it becomes a problem immediately. Well, so Lutherans and Calvinists are actually at each other's throats. And Lutherans and Calvinists are at the throats of the Zwinglians, and they're at the throats of the Anabaptists. You know, they're having Luther has Anabaptists drowned. So the idea that Reformed Baptists and Lutherans and Calvinists and Anglicans share a common faith, excuse me, they killed each other. What are you talking about? This is ridiculous.
Oh, I had no idea about that.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is basic. I'm not trying to knock you, but this is basic Reformation history. I mean, the Anglicans and the Presbyterians in England used to kill each other. I mean, they felt so strongly about church government that it was something worth dying over, right? It's the what were they called? The Cavaliers, the Royalists, right? Look up that.
Okay. Yeah, because that whole section of Christian history outside of Greece and Russia, to be honest with you, like from like the 13th century into I guess the 18th or 19th century, like that's just a complete blur for me. And you know, not so much because I don't care, but not so much it really doesn't affect me because it's I you could correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I could tell, there was really no impactful interaction between Protestantism and Orthodoxy between those periods, if I'm not mistaken.
Very little. I mean, Luther reached out to some people in the East. There was Anglican and Orthodox dialogues in, I think, the 1800s, late 1800s, but not really much came out of all this. But yeah, I mean, the main point here is just illustrative that there's not a common Reformation church, right? Like that iffy man that we were talking to yesterday. I'm not knocking him. He's a great guy. He asked a lot of great questions, but you know, he was saying, "Oh, I'm part of the magisterial Reformation tradition." Okay, well, what is that? I mean, because the very guys who are amongst the magisterial reformers hate each other and considered each other heretics and had each other's followers killed. So, yeah, I don't think there is such a thing. It's an illusion that they construct that, oh, well, we're part of the Reformation Church. There is no Reformation Church. There's a bunch of different sectarians, and their followers all kill each other. And they're only loosely united on, as you said, being anti-Rome, and you know they don't even,
justification by faith alone.
Well, they're not even unified on that, right? But they're not even unified on that because amongst Protestants who consider themselves classically Reformed, they can't tell you if justification is justification by faith in Christ in a generic sense, in the deity of Christ, the death, burial, resurrection? Or do you also have to believe in the doctrine of justification by faith alone to be saved? Do you see? That's actually a big debate amongst the proponents of sola fide. And many of them think, no, you actually have to know about sola fide to be saved. Because if you don't believe in sola fide, you're in some way de facto trusting in your works, and you can't be saved by trusting in works. So even the solas, there's no clarity on the solas. They all disagree. Now, right. I understand that, and so there was some nerdy Reformed dude who tried to make a response to this, and like he was going through citing Reformed confessions that there's agreement in the confessions and stuff. It doesn't matter that the confessions use the same words. So, for example, the London Baptist Confession, which is a Calvinist Baptist confession, is literally just a copy and paste job from the Westminster Confession, and they just delete the sections about infant baptism. So you're gonna tell me that, oh, Reformed Baptists and Presbyterians are actually part of the same faith, even though they don't commune together, they don't do anything together except argue Calvinism's 5 points, right? They fundamentally disagree on something as fundamental as the sacraments, but they're the same church because there's similarities in their confessions. That's ridiculous. They're not the same church. I spent years amongst both Reformed Baptists and Presbyterians. I was asked to leave my Baptist school because I was attending a PCA church.